It began in silence, a silence so complete that even the birds forgot to sing. The Mississippi had stopped breathing. Cracked riverbeds stretched for miles, the air thick with the ghosts of what once was. And there, moving through the desolation, like a shadow of the past, was a dog. Old, thin, eyes dulled by memories. Ranger. Once a hero, now forgotten by the world he'd protected. Yet he still searched. Every scent of the wind, every echo of footsteps, as if his lost partner might somehow still be out there. But instead of finding his human, he found something far more impossible. A cry. A faint, broken cry from under a fallen tree. What he discovered that day wasn't human. It wasn't even canine. It was a baby elephant, abandoned by fate, and left for the sun to claim. That meeting, between an aging shepherd and a dying calf, would defy every rule of the wild. It would test courage, compassion, and the quiet power that still beats in the hearts of those who choose to love. Because even when the river went silent, their story taught the world to listen again. The Mississippi had forgotten how to move. Once a living artery of America's heartland, the river now lay in fractured silence, its wide brown current reduced to a snaking skeleton of cracked clay and glinting dust. The wind no longer carried the scent of wet earth, only the sting of desolation. Where riverboats once floated, and laughter from the docks echoed across the water, there were only abandoned hulls resting on hard, broken ground. Their metal bones groaned when the wind passed through, like ghosts protesting the drought's cruelty. Above the lifeless expanse, a pair of vultures circled aimlessly. They weren't looking for a meal anymore. They were looking for the memory of one. The fish were gone. The turtles buried themselves deep in the remaining mud. Even the cattails bowed, dry and brittle, their roots thirsting for a river that might never return. From the horizon came a lone figure, a German shepherd, coat sun-faded, ribs faintly visible beneath the grime of travel. Walked slowly, head low, paws stirring up small puffs of dust. His name had once been Ranger. It still was, though no one called him that now. The name was stitched into a torn police collar around his neck. The leather cracked, the tag clinking faintly with every weary step. He walked with the cautious grace of a veteran, scanning every sound, every shift of wind. But there was no danger left to detect, no partner's voice to obey, no scent trail worth following. The world had emptied itself, and Ranger, too, seemed emptied with it. The camera lingers on his eyes, the once sharp gaze of a protector, now clouded by something harder to define. Loss. He pauses beside what used to be the riverbank. The ground slopes down into nothing, a long scar where the Mississippi once shimmered blue under the sun. He lowers his head and sniffs the dry mud, then looks up, confused, as if expecting water to suddenly appear. Time for hundreds. His ears flick back. The silence is total. Then, faintly, the sound of a memory. The hum of city sirens. Footsteps. A man's voice. "Ranger, heel!" The sharp command of partnership. The dog obeys, steady, focused, side by side with a uniformed officer. The flashback flickers like sunlight through broken glass. A chase through rain-slick alleys, the glint of a badge, a rescue from a burning house, the laughter of a man who kneels ruffling the shepherd's fur. "You did good, buddy," the voice says. "We protect those who can't protect themselves." The flash fades. Now the same badge lies half buried in the dirt, half swallowed by the drought's endless dust. Ranger sniffs it once, then presses his nose gently against it. The touch is almost reverent. A soldier visiting a fallen comrade's grave. He steps away slowly, the sun burning the horizon into shades of rust and copper. Heat ripples distort the landscape like a mirage. Trees bending in the shimmer. the distant ruins of a boathouse looking like a memory more than a structure. He stops at the edge of a dried channel, where fish skeletons glint like silver coins scattered by time. For a long moment, he stands still. Then, with a deep intake of breath, he lifts his head toward the fading sun and howls. It is not the sharp, warning cry of a hunter. It is a long, hollow note that carries sorrow into the wind. The sound rolls across the open plains, echoing between the ribs of empty barges and dead cottonwoods. Somewhere, a bird startles and flies, the only living thing to answer him. The howl continues until it trembles into silence. He lowers his head, panting softly. His tongue, once pink, is pale and dry. His legs tremble slightly as he sits on the warm clay. The day is nearly over, and still, he has nowhere to go. The camera moves closer, a single tear of moisture in the corner of his eye, catching the dying light. Maybe it's just dust. Maybe it's memory. A breeze picks up, faint, hesitant, as though the world itself is taking a shallow breath. It ruffles the fur around Ranger's ears, carrying with it a distant scent, faint smoke, the trace of cooking, the hum of generators from a research outpost, miles away. For the first time in days, his ears lift fully. He stands again, sniffing, nose twitching. There's something human in the air, something alive. He hesitates. Survival has taught him caution. Heartbreak has taught him fear. But loneliness can break even the strongest training. With a low, uncertain whine, Ranger begins to move toward the faint sound of life. Each step seems to cost him effort, but the pull of instinct, or perhaps hope, drives him forward. He crosses dry reeds and shattered branches, his shadow stretching long behind him in the evening light. Above him, the sky turns bruised purple. The sun slips behind the skeletal trees. Then, darkness, and the soft glow of stars that look down on the bones of a once living river. In the distance, faint camplights flicker to life. A father and daughter sit outside their tent, unaware that something lost is walking toward them. Ranger stops one last time before leaving the river's edge. He looks back, at the badge half buried in the dust, at the silence that raised him these past lonely months. His chest rises in a quiet sigh. Then, he turns his gaze forward, toward the faint shimmer of light. As he walks into the twilight, his silhouette becomes one with the land, a lone guardian crossing a world that has forgotten him. A soft female voice overlays the fading scene, older, reflective, full of emotion. It's Lily, years later, narrating as if remembering a legend. He had forgotten what home sounded like until we found him. The screen fades to black, and the faint echo of Ranger's howl lingers, carried away by the same wind that once moved the great river. The wind carried the scent of rust and dust through the narrow canvas flaps of the tent. Beyond it, the once mighty Mississippi Delta stretched like a memory of life, flat, cracked, and aching for rain. Dr. Samuel Hayes adjusted the antenna on his handheld receiver, the screen flickering weakly in the fading daylight. Every so often, a soft ping echoed through his headset, each one marking a heartbeat of survival somewhere out there among the dying land. Another one? Lily's small voice broke through the static. She sat cross-legged beside him on the wooden crate that served as their table, her sun-bleached hair tied in a loose braid, her cheeks smudged with dirt and determination. Her hands clutched a worn notebook filled with sketches. Birds, deer, and creatures she imagined still wandered these dry plains. Coyotes, Dr. Hayes murmured. 2 of them, still moving west. They're heading toward what's left of the marsh. Lily frowned. Then they're looking for water, too. Her father glanced down, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew how fragile the world around them had become. The drought had silenced things they once took for granted. Frog song, crickets, the whisper of reeds in the wind. Every living creature left here was clinging to survival by instinct or miracle. Lily brushed at a page in her notebook where she'd drawn a heron standing alone in cracked mud. She had given it a name. Brave. She named everything. It was her way of making the dying world feel alive again. A sharp sound broke the stillness. Ping. Dr. Hayes frowned, adjusting the receiver. The blip moved erratically, zigzagging across a section of the map miles north of their camp. "That's strange," he murmured. "One of the old tracking collars just activated. Looks like a canine, large one." "A dog?" Lily leaned closer, eyes wide. "Could be," he said, squinting. "But it's alone. And it's covering ground, like it doesn't know where to go." Lily's hand tightened around her pencil. "Can we find it?" Her father hesitated. "If it's a wild dog, it could be dangerous." But Lily's gaze was unwavering, full of something purer than logic. Compassion. "Dad," she whispered, "if it's still moving, it's still trying." Dr. Hayes let out a slow breath, looking toward the horizon where the last edge of sunlight turned the dry reeds gold. He turned off the receiver and nodded once. "Get your boots." They found him near twilight. Ranger stood half hidden among the reeds at the edge of the dry basin, his silhouette framed by the fading orange light. His coat, once rich and dark, was matted and streaked with dirt. His ribs showed like faint shadows beneath his fur. Yet there was something noble in his stance, the quiet defiance of a creature that refused to bow to despair. When Dr. Hayes and Lily approached, Ranger didn't snarl or flee. He only watched, wary but unbroken. Lily crouched slowly, her small form barely reaching his chest. "Hey there," she whispered, voice trembling but kind. "It's okay, boy. You don't have to be afraid." Ranger's ears flicked toward her, his tail unmoving. His body stayed tense, eyes darting between father and daughter. Dr. Hayes kept his tone low and even. "He's wearing a collar. That's a K9 tag. Police issue." Lily gasped softly. "So he had a family." The dog's head lowered slightly at the word family, as though the sound itself reached into a memory too heavy to hold. Lily reached into her backpack and pulled out a canteen. "You're thirsty, aren't you?" she said gently, unscrewing the cap. She poured a small stream of water into her cupped hands and held them out, trembling from the weight of trust. Ranger took a single step forward. His nose brushed her palm, and he hesitated, the scent of salt, metal, and human kindness flooding him all at once. Then, cautiously, he lapped the water. Lily exhaled shakily, smiling through the tears that had gathered in her eyes. "See, Dad? He's just tired." Dr. Hayes crouched beside her, voice soft. "Or maybe he's been waiting for someone to find him." Ranger finished drinking and sat, chest rising and falling with slow, heavy breaths. The fading sun painted his fur gold, and for a moment, he looked almost whole again. Lily touched the old badge still hanging from his collar, brushing away the dust. The metal gleamed faintly. Ranger 17. "Ranger," she read aloud. "That's his name." The dog looked up at her then, as if remembering who he was. That night, the camp was quiet except for the hum of insects drawn to the lantern's glow. Dr. Hayes sat at his desk, scribbling field notes and marking coordinates on a map. "Subject shows cooperative behavior," he murmured into his recorder. "Malnourished, dehydrated, but responsive to human presence, possibly trained for law enforcement." Across from him, Lily lay on her sleeping bag beside Ranger. The dog was stretched out, his body finally at rest. Every so often, his paws twitched, perhaps chasing the ghosts of old memories. Lily ran her fingers through his fur, slow and gentle. "You're safe now," she whispered, almost afraid to speak too loudly, in case the world took the moment back. "We'll take care of you." Ranger's tail gave a faint, sleepy thump. His breathing deepened. For the first time in many nights, maybe many months, his body relaxed completely. He shifted slightly, placing one paw across the edge of her shoe, as though anchoring himself to something real, something good. Lily smiled, a tear slipping silently down her cheek. "You found us," she whispered. Outside, the night wind sighed through the reeds. A single lantern flickered, throwing soft gold light on the pair. The little girl and the ghost dog who had wandered back into the world of the living. Dr. Hayes looked up from his notes, watching them for a long time. His expression softened. The quiet, uncertain look of a man who had spent too long studying life instead of feeling it. He turned off the recorder. "Good night, partner," he murmured under his breath. It wasn't clear if he meant the dog, or the man the dog had once served. Hours later, the fire dwindled to embers. Ranger dreamed. Faint twitching of his paws, the muffled sound of a bark caught in his throat. When dawn approached, a pale blue light crept across the camp. Mist gathered over the dry riverbed, ghostly and silent. Lily stirred, rubbing her eyes. Ranger lifted his head, ears pricking. Something distant broke the stillness. A sound carried through the trees. Not the call of a bird. Not the moan of wind. Something else. A long, trembling cry. Faint, unfamiliar, and full of sorrow. Dr. Hayes stepped out of the tent, scanning the horizon. "What was that?" Lily stood beside Ranger, clutching his collar as if afraid he might vanish. "It sounded like a baby crying." Ranger's gaze locked toward the east, nose twitching. The old instincts flickered awake again. But this time, they led him not toward danger, but destiny. He barked once, low, firm, then started walking. Lily's eyes followed him, wide with wonder. "Dad," she whispered, "I think he knows where it's coming from." And as the morning sun broke the horizon, the three of them, man, child, and dog, began walking toward the sound. That would change their lives forever. The midday sun bore down like a punishment. The air shimmered above the barren plain, every breath tasting of dust and heat. Even the insects had gone silent, sheltering from the merciless blaze. The land, stripped of water and mercy, looked more like the surface of another planet than the Mississippi Delta that once pulsed with life. Lily trudged ahead through the brittle grass, her small hand gripping the hem of her hat to shield her face. Ranger trotted beside her, tongue lolling, ears flicking toward the distant cries they had heard earlier, faint, haunting, and unmistakably alive. Dr. Hayes followed several paces behind, his boots crunching on cracked earth, his field recorder swinging at his side. "Slow down, Lily," he called. "It could be anything out here. A wounded animal, a predator." But she didn't stop. The sound had changed. Closer now, sharper, like the desperate sob of something too young to understand pain. It pulled at her with invisible threads. She only looked back long enough to shout, "It's a baby, Dad! I can tell!" Ranger moved faster, nose low to the ground. His pace shifted from cautious to urgent, the kind of stride born from instinct and memory. The scent was strange. Not canine, not deer, not anything he had known. But beneath the foreign musk was something deeper, fear, and the faint, sweet smell of life hanging by a thread. Ahead, an ancient baobab tree rose from the flat horizon, its thick trunk split and hollowed by years of drought. Its roots twisted through the cracked soil like the veins of the earth itself. Beneath its meager shade, something stirred. Lily stopped so suddenly that Dr. Hayes nearly collided with her. There, tangled between the exposed roots, lay a creature so small and fragile it seemed carved from clay and grief. Its wrinkled gray skin clung to its bones, its ears drooping, its trunk twitching weakly in the dust. A baby elephant, no taller than Lily's shoulders. Its eyes were half closed, crusted with salt. And tears. "Oh, God," Dr. Hayes whispered, lowering his camera. "How did it get here?" Lily dropped to her knees beside it, her voice breaking. "Dad, it's still breathing." The little calf's trunk lifted an inch, trembling in the air like a question. A dry, breathless sound came from it. Part whimper, part plea. Lily's heart clenched. She reached out, but Dr. Hayes caught her wrist gently. "Don't," he said softly. "It's too weak. We could scare it." She looked up at him through tears. "Scare it? It's dying, Dad. Please." Before he could answer, a low growl rumbled through the stillness. Ranger had frozen. His muscles tensed beneath his weathered fur, his eyes locked on the calf. The air between predator and prey trembled. His lips curled just slightly, not from hunger, but confusion. Every instinct he'd ever known told him this was food. Easy, defenseless. Dr. Hayes's hand hovered near his tranquilizer kit. "Stay calm, boy. Stay calm." Ranger took a step forward. Dust rose from his paws. Lily's breath caught in her throat. But something stopped him. The sound of the baby's breathing. It wasn't the rhythm of prey. It was softer, uneven, human almost. The sound of a life begging not to be alone. The old shepherd hesitated, ears tilting forward, his head lowered. The growl faded into silence. He moved closer, slow and deliberate. Lily's eyes widened, tears clinging to her lashes. "Dad, look." Ranger approached until his shadow covered the baby elephant's small body. The calf didn't flinch. Its half-lidded eyes rolled toward him, cracked, glazed, but not afraid. There was trust there, inexplicable and pure. And then, something broke inside the old dog, a dam of instinct, grief, and memory. He lay down beside the dying creature, his flank pressed against its trembling skin, the contact gentle, protective. The elephant gave a weak gasp, then sighed, as though the weight of the world had been lifted from its tiny chest. Lily's voice quivered through the heat. He's protecting it." Dr. Hayes could barely breathe. He fumbled for his camera, hands shaking as he hit record. The lens trembled in the sunlight, capturing a moment no science book had ever prepared him for. A predator choosing compassion over survival. "This," he whispered, "changes everything." The baby elephant gave a faint cry, then reached out its trunk, exploring the space around Ranger's face. The movement was clumsy, slow, but deliberate. The small trunk brushed against the shepherd's muzzle, sliding across his whiskers before resting there, as if seeking comfort. Ranger didn't move. He closed his eyes and let the trunk stay, breathing slowly, evenly. Lily pressed her hands over her mouth to stifle a sob. "Dad, he's letting it touch him." Her father nodded, speechless. The camera lingered on the contact, a thin, quivering trunk, and a scarred muzzle. Two species bound by a single, fragile moment of mercy. Ranger exhaled a deep, low sound, almost a whine, almost a lullaby. His tail gave one slow wag in the dust, The elephant's ears flickered in response, and for the first time since they found it, its breathing steadied. Dr. Hayes crouched, lowering the camera, his scientific detachment dissolving into awe. "He's giving it warmth," he murmured. "Instinct says kill, but he stopped, shaking his head. He's choosing to care." The world seemed to hold its breath around them. Even the heat felt softer, the light bending through the baobab branches like a prayer. Lily reached out, trembling, and touched the baby elephant's flank. Its skin was hot, rough like parchment, but alive. The calf made a small sound, halfway between a chirp and a sigh, then nestled closer to Ranger, who shifted slightly to give it more space. Tears slid down Lily's cheeks. "He's not alone anymore," she whispered. Her father swallowed hard. "Neither of them are." They stayed like that for a long time, the dog, the elephant, the girl, and the man, suspended in the heat-hazed silence of a dying land. When the first shadow of a vulture crossed the ground, Ranger lifted his head and growled softly, his body tense again, but his stance was different now, not the stance of a hunter, but a guardian. Dr. Hayes raised the camera once more, his voice thick with reverence. "The world won't believe this," he said quietly. Lily, still kneeling beside them, brushed a hand across her eyes. "Then we'll make them." The camera zooms in on the moment, the small trunk rising again, this time curling gently around Ranger's muzzle. The shepherd's eyes, once hollow, soften as he presses his nose against the trunk in return. Two survivors, one born of discipline, the other of innocence, meeting halfway in the desert of a dying world. The impossible bond had begun. The sun was merciless, a white, unblinking eye hanging above the dead plains. Heat shimmered in waves, bending the horizon until earth and sky bled into each other. The old baobab tree stood behind them like a monument to endurance, its twisted roots clinging stubbornly to life. And beneath that tree, something extraordinary had just begun. The baby elephant, barely strong enough to lift his head, tried to rise. His knees buckled. His trunk drooped in exhaustion. The small creature swayed and nearly fell, his strength fading faster than the sun could move across the sky. Ranger stood close, panting heavily, tail low but steady. The air between him and the calf was alive with something wordless, a quiet, unspoken understanding. He nudged the elephant's side gently with his muzzle, then barked once, sharp and commanding. Lily flinched at the sound, fearing it meant aggression, but instead, the elephant responded, lifting his head, ears flicking weakly, as though that bark had reached somewhere deep inside him. "He's encouraging him," Lily whispered in disbelief. Dr. Hayes lowered his camera. "They're communicating," he said softly. "It's instinct. It's survival. He stopped, unable to find a word large enough to fit what was unfolding before his eyes. Ranger barked again, then stepped forward a few paces and looked back, tail twitching. The baby hesitated, then pushed himself to his feet, trembling like a newborn. He took one unsteady step, then another. The journey had begun. From the baobab tree to the last known mud pool was 4 miles. 4 endless miles of cracked clay, shifting dust, and heat that could blister skin in minutes. The landscape was a furnace, but Ranger led the way, every sense focused on one mission: keep the baby alive. Lily and Dr. Hayes followed at a distance, their figures blurred by the haze. They didn't speak. Every word felt too heavy, in the air, every sound too sacred to disturb. Ranger moved ahead, barking occasionally, glancing back to ensure the calf followed. The baby stumbled often, his feet too soft for the jagged ground. Each time he fell, Ranger circled back, pressing his shoulder against the calf's flank, urging him up with gentle insistence. Once, when the elephant's legs folded completely, Ranger crouched beside him, nuzzling the small trunk with his snout, whining softly, a sound that carried exhaustion and encouragement in equal measure. Lily wiped sweat from her forehead, voice tight. He's not going to make it if they don't find water soon. Dr. Hayes adjusted his pack, scanning the horizon. There's a small pool near the eastern ridge, he said. If it hasn't dried up completely. He didn't finish the sentence. The earth cracked under their boots. The wind carried dust into their eyes and mouths. Even breathing felt like swallowing sand. Hours passed in this slow agony of motion. The baby's cries grew weaker. Ranger's paws began to bleed, dark prints staining the pale soil. Yet he never stopped. Not even when the wind turned fierce, whipping grit into his eyes. He'd pause only long enough to let the calf lean against him, then move forward again. One step at a time. Dr. Hayes raised his camera, his voice hoarse with awe. Look at him. Look at that dog. Every cell in his body tells him to survive alone. But he won't. Halfway through the trek, the baby collapsed. Lily screamed and ran forward before her father could stop her. The little elephant lay still, his sides barely rising. Ranger circled him frantically, whining, pawing at the ground. Then, as if struck by instinct older than memory, he began to dig, furious, desperate, his paws tearing into the dry soil. Dust filled the air as he worked. He stopped only to sniff, then dig again, moving in tight circles until the ground darkened slightly with dampness. He's found moisture, Dr. Hayes realized, his voice catching. He's digging for groundwater. Lily dropped to her knees beside the shallow pit. It's wet, she cried. She unscrewed her canteen and poured the water over the dark patch, turning the dust into mud. The baby stirred, a faint flicker of life. Dr. Hayes, trembling, took off his hat and filled it with the last of their remaining water. He knelt and lifted the elephant's head carefully. Easy, little one. Easy. The calf's trunk twitched, then dipped into the hat. He drank in slow, desperate gulps, the sound small and heartbreakingly human. Ranger watched, chest heaving, his tongue hanging dry. Lily offered him the canteen. He licked only a few drops, then turned back toward the calf, the unspoken choice of protector over self. Lily brushed his fur, whispering, "You're a good boy, Ranger. The best." The elephant drank again. Longer this time. His breathing steadied. His eyes fluttered open, still glazed, but brighter. When he lifted his head fully, Ranger barked once, a short, sharp command. The baby swayed, then rose again on trembling legs. And so they continued. The sun began to fall, turning the land to copper and fire. Shadows stretched long across the earth. Ranger's pace slowed, his steps uneven now, but he still moved with determination. The horizon shimmered, and at last, the glint of something darker appeared between the dunes. Water. Or what remained of it. A shallow pool, half mud, half memory, but still alive. The moment the baby saw it, he gave a sound, a weak trumpet that cracked the silence like a hymn. He stumbled forward, nearly falling, and Ranger followed close behind, barking encouragement through gasps of exhaustion. When they reached the edge, the baby plunged his trunk into the muddy water, splashing, drinking greedily. Droplets clung to his dry skin like diamonds. He waded in, trembling with relief. Ranger sank down nearby, too tired to move further. His sides heaved, his eyes half closed. His paws were caked with blood and mud. But his gaze stayed fixed on the calf, making sure he drank, making sure he lived. Dr. Hayes lowered his camera slowly. His voice was barely a whisper. He saved him. Lily knelt beside Ranger, resting a hand on his back. She looked up at her father, her face soft but steady. "No, Dad," she said quietly. "They saved each other." For a long moment, none of them spoke. The sun slid beneath the horizon, painting the pool in molten gold. The elephant's reflection rippled beside the dogs, two survivors bound by something that defied every rule of nature. Lily leaned her head against Ranger's shoulder as he closed his eyes, his breathing slow, but peaceful. The wind eased, the heat softened, and somewhere in the distance thunder murmured, a promise that rain would come again. The camera lingers on the orange water, the faint ring of ripples spreading outward like the echo of a heartbeat. Then the world fades into dusk. Weeks passed, and the land began to breathe again. The first rains had kissed the delta just enough to wake it from its coma. Small shoots of green now pushed through cracks in the soil, shy but determined. The shallow pond that had once been a dying puddle shimmered faintly in the early light, its surface alive with dragonflies and the faint hum of returning insects. Life, fragile and hesitant, was finding its rhythm again, and so were they. Ranger trotted along the pond's edge, ears perked, eyes alert. His once matted fur had grown clean and soft under Lily's careful brushing. Though his gait still carried the weight of age and old wounds, he moved with purpose, the quiet authority of a guardian who had found something worth living for again. Behind him lumbered Hope, the name Lily had chosen for the baby elephant, who now shadowed the shepherd's every move. The little giant's strength had returned in bursts. His skin had regained its supple gray sheen, and his trunk, once drooping and weak, now swung freely as he explored the world with childish curiosity. Hope paused near a patch of reeds, sniffing curiously, then dug at the earth with his small, rounded foot. He looked toward Ranger for approval. The old dog barked once, short, clipped, almost like a teacher correcting a student. Then he moved closer and began pawing at the soil with his front paws, scattering dirt until a tangle of roots appeared. Hope lowered his head, sniffed again, then pulled the root free with his trunk, tasting it clumsily. His eyes brightened. Ranger wagged his tail. From their makeshift observation tent, Lily clapped her hands in delight. "He's teaching him again, Dad. Look at that." Dr. Hayes adjusted his camera lens, his voice low with awe. "He's showing him how to forage. This isn't mimicry, it's instruction. He's learning cross-species behavior." He pressed the record button and continued in his dictation voice, almost reverent. "We are witnessing the rewriting of instinct." The camera followed Ranger and Hope through the shallow greenery. The unlikely pair moved in rhythm, their shadows stretching long against the morning light. Predator and prey, master and student, guardian and child. Afternoons were softer now. The once dead air had begun to smell faintly of wet grass and life returning. Lily spent her days sketching by the water, while her father cataloged behavioral data, often glancing up from his clipboard just to watch the miracle unfold. In one moment, Hope wandered too close to the pond's far end, where the reeds thickened and the mud grew deep. Ranger barked sharply, the sound echoing across the water. Hope froze, startled. Then, remembering the tone from past warnings, he retreated obediently. "Did you see that?" Lily whispered. "He listens to him like a kid listens to his dad." Dr. Hayes smiled faintly. "Or maybe, like a friend listens to someone who's kept him alive." Lily giggled and dipped her brush into her watercolor tin. On the page of her worn notebook, 3 figures began to take shape: an elephant calf, a German shepherd, and a small girl sitting nearby, legs crossed, watching them. Beneath it, she wrote in neat, careful letters, "My family of 3. She looked up and watched as Hope playfully filled his trunk with muddy water. With a joyful squeal, he sprayed a wide arc across the pond, splattering Ranger, who shook himself furiously and barked in protest. Lily burst into laughter, the sound bright and alive. "He got you, Ranger!" Ranger gave her a look somewhere between annoyance and dignity, then lunged at the water, splashing hope in return. The elephant trumpeted, startled, then trumpeted again, a happy, booming sound that rolled across the meadow like thunder. Dr. Hayes lowered his notebook. For a long time, he didn't write anything. He just watched. The laughter, the play, the impossible bond. For years, he had studied ecosystems and decline, recording extinction. But this was rebirth. In his recorder, his voice softened. What we're seeing isn't survival. It's connection. The kind that doesn't fit in any of our charts. Evening came with gold light spilling through thin clouds. The world glowed, every blade of grass glistening with droplets from Hope's latest splashing session. Dr. Hayes sat near the campfire, entering data into his laptop, while Lily fed Ranger pieces of dried meat from her pocket. Hope stood nearby, swaying gently, his trunk moving through the air like a conductor leading a silent orchestra. "He's getting big," Lily said dreamily. "Do you think he knows he's different?" Dr. Hayes looked up from his screen. Maybe. Or maybe he just knows. He's loved. Ranger lifted his head at the sound of their voices. He shifted closer to Hope and lay down, paws stretched forward, eyes half closed but alert. Hope responded by curling his trunk gently over the dog's back, as if covering him with a blanket. The camera of Dr. Hayes's mind, and the literal one beside him, captured the image perfectly. Predator and prey, bound not by instinct, but by trust. Lily whispered, almost to herself, "They're like brothers." Her father nodded, voice quiet. "Sometimes family doesn't look the way we expect it to." But even amid the peace, time began to whisper its truth. At first, it was barely noticeable. A limp in Ranger's step after long patrols, a hesitation before lying down, a deeper pant in the midday heat. His once sharp barks softened. His energy waned, though he still forced himself to keep pace beside the growing elephant. Dr. Hayes noticed first. "He's slowing down," he murmured one afternoon, watching Ranger trail behind Hope. Age, old injuries. His paws never healed right after that drought march. Lily frowned, her brush hovering above her notebook. "Can't we fix him?" Her father sighed, setting down his camera. "He doesn't need fixing, sweetheart. He just needs time and love. We'll give him both." That evening, Ranger rested beside the campfire, head nestled against Lily's knee. His eyes followed Hope as the young elephant played with reeds, trumpeting softly into the dusky air. Lily stroked the dog's fur, her touch gentle. "You can rest if you want," she whispered. "He's learning because of you." Ranger's eyes blinked slowly, half gratitude, half exhaustion. He gave a faint sigh, tail tapping the dirt once, twice. Above them, the moon rose, pale and patient, over the delta. The night was alive again, crickets humming, frogs croaking from the shallow water, and somewhere in the dark, the rustle of coyotes kept Ranger's ear just tilted toward the horizon. Even weary, he was still the guardian. The world, once broken, was mending itself, one unlikely friendship at a time. And as the fire crackled low, Lily's last brushstroke on the page completed their portrait. A tired old shepherd, a playful elephant, and a girl who believed that love could rewrite the laws. Twilight crept across the delta like spilled ink, bleeding into the soft gold of dusk until the land turned bruised and blue. The air was heavy, tense, too still, too silent. Not even the frogs dared to sing. Dr. Hayes sat outside the tent, finishing his evening notes by lantern light. The rhythmic clicking of the keys was the only sound, until Ranger's head suddenly lifted from his paws. The shepherd's ears flicked sharply. His body stiffened, a living barometer sensing the shift in the world around him. "Ranger?" Lily whispered, setting down her sketchbook. The dog's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. He stared into the darkness beyond the pond, muscles tightening, nostrils flaring. A low growl vibrated in his chest, deep, primal, warning. Lily turned toward the black expanse of trees. The wind carried a faint, sour scent, the musk of predators, hungry and desperate. "Dad," she whispered, "he smells something." Dr. Hayes froze. He clicked off the lantern, plunging them into a wash of starlight and shadow. "Get inside the tent," he murmured. "Now." Lily obeyed, though her eyes stayed fixed on the field beyond the fire's dying glow. Out there, near the edge of the reeds, movement flickered. Low, sleek, and silent. Ranger's growl deepened. The old instincts of a police dog, duty, protection, readiness, surged through his tired body. His tail rose stiffly as he moved forward, placing himself between the camp and the open water. The first shape appeared. A cougar, ribs showing, eyes catching the faintest gleam of moonlight. Another followed. Then two more. A small pack, drawn by thirst and starvation, padding silently through the grass. Their paws made no sound, but the air itself seemed to pulse with danger. Inside the tent, Dr. Hayes clutched his flashlight, but didn't dare turn it on. His voice was a whisper of disbelief. "Cougars. 3. No, 4 of them. They must have been tracking the scent of the pond." Lily's hand trembled against the canvas wall. "Hope's still out there." And he was. The young elephant stood near the water's edge, ears twitching, trunk curled against his chest. His wide eyes reflected starlight, frightened, uncertain. He let out a soft, quivering trumpet that trembled in the air like a plea. Ranger turned at the sound, gave a short bark, not of panic, but command. It was the same bark he'd used when training alongside his handler years ago. "Stay behind me." Hope understood. He took a stumbling step back, his massive frame quivering. Ranger's gaze swept across the tree line again. The hunters were fanning out, circling. The odds were impossible, yet the shepherd didn't flinch. Dr. Hayes pressed his hand to Lily's shoulder, forcing himself to stay silent. If they rushed out, they'd only draw attention. All they could do was watch and pray. The pack advanced. The lead cougar growled low, its ribs stretching with every breath. Hunger had stripped it of caution. Its yellow eyes locked on the elephant, an unnatural target. But desperation had erased logic. Ranger moved forward, placing himself squarely between Hope and the approaching predators. His posture changed, head lowered, teeth bared, body tense but grounded. He was smaller, weaker, but he carried himself like a soldier who had faced death before and won. The air filled with growls and snarls. The cougars spread wider, forming a half-moon around the watering hole. Ranger's hackles rose. He barked once, a sharp, explosive sound that shattered the silence. The cougars paused, startled. Then they began to creep closer again, muscles coiling. Inside the tent, Lily's eyes glistened with tears. "He's going to get hurt," she whispered. Dr. Hayes clenched his jaw, voice breaking. "He's protecting him, just like he used to protect people." The standoff stretched into eternity. Moonlight glinting off fangs, every breath, a countdown. Ranger lunged first. He barked furiously, darting to one side, snapping at the nearest cougar's flank. It wasn't an attack. It was a distraction, a deliberate act to pull their focus from Hope. The cats hissed and scattered, startled by his sudden aggression. Dust rose in clouds beneath their paws. Hope stumbled backward, trumpeting in terror. Ranger's bark grew louder, raw, echoing through the night like thunder. He darted again, teeth flashing, tail high. The lead cougar pounced, a blur of muscle and hunger. Ranger met it head-on. The impact was brutal, a whirl of fur and claws, a flash of teeth. Ranger yelped, but held his ground, jaws locking onto the cat's shoulder. The cougar screamed and tore away, vanishing into the reeds. The others hesitated, uncertain. That moment of confusion was enough. From the tent, the sudden flare of headlights cut through the darkness like a blade. The roar of an engine followed, and the sharp blast of a truck horn shattered the night. "Go, Ranger!" Dr. Hayes shouted, slamming his hand on the steering wheel. Lily leaned out the open window, hurling food crates into the tall grass. The heavy thud and scattering scent drawing the cougar's attention away from the camp. The cats froze, then darted toward the noise, disappearing one by one into the darkness beyond the reach of the lights. Silence fell. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and fear. The only sound was the crackle of the truck's engine and the distant rustle of fleeing predators. Then Lily's voice, small, shaking, broke the quiet. "Dad, where's Ranger?" Dr. Hayes grabbed a flashlight and jumped out of the truck. The beam swept across the clearing until it found him, lying near the pond, chest rising and falling unevenly. "Ranger!" Lily cried, sprinting forward. She dropped to her knees beside him. The shepherd's side was torn, a deep gash along his shoulder, blood dark against his fur. His breathing was labored, each inhale shallow but steady. Hope lumbered closer, his movements slow and cautious. He knelt awkwardly beside the fallen dog, lowering his trunk until it brushed Ranger's neck. The calf made a low rumbling sound, mournful, tender. Ranger's eyes fluttered open. He turned his head weakly toward Lily. She cupped his face in her hands, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Please don't leave me too," she whispered, voice breaking. The shepherd blinked once, a slow, reassuring gesture, and exhaled a shaky breath. His tail moved just slightly, tapping her wrist, before his eyes closed again. Dr. Hayes knelt beside them, voice low and trembling. "He's going to make it, Lily. He's too stubborn not to." Hope stayed beside Ranger through the night, his trunk wrapped protectively across the dog's chest, like a blanket. Under the cold stars of the Mississippi sky, predator and prey rested side by side, survivors bound not by fear or instinct, but something deeper, something the world had nearly forgotten: love. And somewhere in the darkness, the cougar's eyes faded into the distance, leaving only the quiet hum of crickets returning to song. 2 months had passed since that night of claws and firelight. The wounds had healed, mostly. Ranger's shoulder bore a pale scar where the cougar's claws had cut deep, but the strength had returned to his stride. He still limped slightly on cold mornings, yet when he moved beside Hope, there was purpose again in every step. The dog no longer looked like a relic of the drought. He looked like a guardian reborn. Hope had grown too, taller, heavier, his ears now fanning out proudly when he played in the shallow pond. His once frail trunk had grown strong enough to uproot saplings, but still gentle enough to lift a flower from the mud. Where he once followed Ranger timidly, now he matched him stride for stride, their shadows falling together across the greening land. But peace, like water in the delta, never lasted long. What began as whispers among the research community soon became headlines. Dr. Hayes's footage, the desperate march, the night battle, the image of Hope's trunk wrapped protectively around the sleeping shepherd, had spread beyond his control. A local journalist had published excerpts, and within days the story leapt across continents. "The dog who adopted an elephant," one headline read. Another declared, "Miracle bond in a dying delta, love beyond instinct." Within weeks, the once deserted basin transformed into something else entirely. A stage. Drones buzzed above the trees, their metallic hum cutting through the peace like a swarm of flies. Camera crews waded through mud, whispering excitedly into microphones. Tourists arrived with binoculars and long lenses, hoping for a glimpse of the miracle pair. Lily hated it. She sat near the water's edge, hugging her knees, watching as a drone drifted low over Hope's head. The elephant trumpeted, frightened, flinging a spray of muddy water toward it. The machine jerked, upward, retreating in a clumsy wobble. Ranger barked furiously at the noise, chasing the drone's shadow across the grass until Dr. Hayes called him back. "Leave it, boy," the scientist said gently, his brow creased with exhaustion. "They're not listening anyway." Lily turned to him, voice small but sharp. "They're scaring them, Dad. They don't care what happens. They just want pictures." Dr. Hayes rubbed his temples. "I know, but we can't keep this a secret anymore. The footage, it's too powerful. People think this is proof of something divine." He didn't say what he feared most, that fame would ruin the very thing that made the miracle sacred. Later that day, 2 government vehicles rolled up the dirt track. The men who stepped out wore crisp uniforms, their badges glinting in the afternoon sun. One of them, tall, sharp-featured, expression unreadable, shook Dr. Hayes's hand firmly. "Dr. Hayes," he said, tone polite but official, "we've been asked to assess the situation. The ministry's received international attention and concern. You understand?" Hayes nodded cautiously. "I expected as much." The man glanced toward the pond, where Hope was splashing under Ranger's watchful eye. "Incredible," he murmured, almost admiringly. "A lion and lamb story, right here in Mississippi." "Dog and elephant," Hayes corrected. The man smiled thinly. "Either way, it's unnatural. We're under pressure to act. Conservation law states that displaced wildlife must be relocated to approved sanctuaries. The elephant belongs with its own kind. And that dog, he's a domestic species. This pairing—" He hesitated, searching for a word that sounded less cruel. "It interferes with natural behavior." Hayes's eyes hardened. "Nature made this pairing, not us." The official sighed. "Doctor, the world is watching. You know how this goes: media, politics, funding. We can't allow sentiment to dictate ecology." Hayes said nothing. His hands were trembling. That night, after the officials left, the camp was quiet except for the soft hum of crickets and the steady rush of distant water. Lily couldn't sleep. From inside the tent, she could hear her father's voice, muffled, low, but heated. He was speaking into the radio, arguing with someone miles away. Words like policy, procedure, relocation order floated through the air like cold blades. Then silence. Dr. Hayes emerged into the moonlight, face pale with worry. He looked older than he had in months. Lily sat beside Ranger, her small hands buried in his fur. Hope stood a few feet away, his trunk curled loosely, as if sensing her sadness. "Are they going to take them away?" she asked quietly. Hayes hesitated, throat tight. They're talking about separating them, yes." Lily's breath hitched. "But why? They love each other." "Because people think love isn't supposed to look like this." She pressed her face into Ranger's neck, her tears soaking his fur. "I won't let them." Ranger shifted closer, resting his head heavily across her lap. His eyes, those deep amber pools that had once seen only loss, now met hers with quiet strength. He didn't understand words like policy or relocation, but he understood grief. He could smell it on her skin. Hope let out a low rumble, a sound that was neither fear nor anger, but something softer. He reached his trunk toward her, brushing the side of her arm gently, as if offering comfort. Dr. Hayes watched the 3 of them, girl, dog, elephant, huddled together in the moonlight. Something inside him cracked open. He turned away, his voice breaking into the night. Maybe nature isn't broken, he said quietly. Maybe we are. His words hung in the air, drifting across the quiet pond, where fireflies blinked like fragile stars. By morning, the world returned. Cameras, voices, footsteps. Drones hovered again, buzzing like angry insects. But Ranger and Hope stood firm together at the water's edge, their silhouettes framed by the rising sun. Dr. Hayes stood behind them, exhaustion etched deep into his face but a spark of defiance in his eyes. Lily stayed close to Ranger, one hand resting on his back, her chin lifted toward the horizon. "They don't understand," she said softly. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "No," he replied, "but they will." The camera lens of a documentary team zoomed in from afar, capturing what the world had come to call the miracle of the Delta. A girl, a dog, and an elephant, not defying nature, but redefining it. And as the shutter clicked, Ranger lifted his head, gaze steady, the wind rippling through his fur. He didn't know the word fame. He didn't understand the noise or the crowds. But he knew this: the family he'd found was in danger, and he would stand between them and the world, just as he always had. For him, there was no politics, no science, no law, only loyalty, only love. It began with thunder, a single rolling growl that rattled across the horizon like the warning of some ancient god. The Mississippi sky, swollen and black, had been threatening rain for days, but it came instead, with fury. Lightning split the clouds open, jagged electric veins carving through the dark. When one bolt struck the dry brush near the riverbank, the land exhaled fire. Flames caught fast, licking up the brittle grass and crawling hungrily through the reeds. Within minutes, the wind turned the spark into an inferno. The forest, parched from months of drought, became a roaring wall of orange and smoke. Dr. Hayes burst from the tent, his voice cutting through the rising chaos. "Lily, get the equipment. We have to move now." Lily scrambled to her feet, coughing as the first curls of smoke rolled over the camp. The air burned her throat, acrid and sharp. "What about Ranger and Hope?" "They're by the pond," Hayes shouted. "Go!" She ran toward the clearing, boots pounding against the dry ground. The crackling grew louder, a deafening hiss of oxygen devoured by flame. Through the swirling smoke, she caught sight of Ranger, standing alert beside the pond, barking at something in the distance. Then she saw Hope, pacing wildly at the water's edge, his trunk raised, trumpeting in terror. The elephant's eyes were wide, reflecting fire. His instincts screamed for him to run, to flee the oncoming blaze. But he stayed rooted, unwilling to leave Ranger's side. "Hope!" Lily called, waving frantically. "Come on, follow me!" The elephant trumpeted again. A desperate, confused sound. Ranger turned, coughing, his body outlined by the eerie glow of the advancing flames. He barked once at Lily, sharp, urgent, then circled Hope, snapping at the air, guiding him the only way he knew how. Dr. Hayes appeared through the haze, a wet cloth wrapped around his mouth. "We've got to move toward the riverbed," he shouted. "The fire's sweeping east." But the wind shifted. The flames surged faster than they could think, a living wall of heat devouring everything in its path. Ash rained from above, glowing like dying stars. Animals burst from the brush in frantic waves. Deer, foxes, birds, all fleeing in blind panic. Hope stumbled backward, trumpeting wildly, his massive body trembling. Ranger darted between his legs, barking again and again, pushing him toward open ground. "Come on, boy," Dr. Hayes murmured hoarsely, guiding Lily ahead. "We're almost clear." A branch cracked overhead, then another. Without warning, a burning limb collapsed in front of them, sending up a shower of sparks that swallowed the path whole. Lily screamed, stumbling backward as the flames flared up between her and her father. "Dad!" Lily! Hayes lunged forward, but the heat forced him back. He could barely see her through the thick smoke, her small form silhouetted against the inferno. "Stay where you are!" he shouted, voice breaking. "I'm coming around!" But Lily was trapped. Fire coiled around her like a serpent, cutting off escape on all sides. She fell to her knees, coughing violently, the smoke clawing down her lungs. Ranger heard her. He hesitated only a heartbeat before bolting toward the flames. "Ranger, no!" Hayes shouted, but it was too late. The shepherd charged through the wall of heat, fur singeing, paws striking the burning earth. The smell of smoke and char filled the air, but still he ran, eyes locked on the small, crumpled shape ahead. Through the swirling fire, Lily saw him, his silhouette emerging like a ghost from the inferno. "Ranger!" she sobbed, reaching out. He reached her, barking furiously, circling once before tugging at the scarf around her neck. It was cotton, already smoldering. With his teeth, he yanked it free, dragging it across the ground and stamping it out with his body. Then he barked, short, panicked bursts, calling to her father through the smoke. "Time, 400ms. Dr. Hayes's voice echoed faintly. "Hold on, Lily." The world became a chaos of firelight and sound, crackling branches, the thunder of burning trees, the pounding of her own heartbeat. Ranger pressed against her side, shielding her from the worst of the heat. His fur was blackened at the tips, paws scorched, but he didn't move. He barked again, louder, defiant, until finally a shadow broke through the smoke. Dr. Hayes. He reached them, coughing, tears streaking down his soot-covered face. "Good boy, good boy," he gasped, scooping Lily into his arms. "You're okay, baby. You're okay." But Ranger collapsed where he stood, chest heaving. The pads of his feet were burned raw, his breath shallow and ragged. He tried to rise, but couldn't. "Ranger!" Lily cried, struggling in her father's grip. Then the ground shook, a deep, rolling tremor that silenced even the fire for a moment. Out of the haze came a low, resonant trumpet. Hope. The young elephant charged toward them through the smoke, his skin streaked with soot, trunk raised like a banner. When he reached the edge of the fire line, he plunged his trunk into the muddy pond behind him and flung a wave of black, ash-thick water across the burning grass. The hiss was deafening, fire dying under mud, smoke collapsing into steam. Again and again, Hope scooped and sprayed, creating a circle of wet earth around the trio. When the flames finally weakened, Hope stood over them, sides heaving, his small body trembling from the effort. Dr. Hayes knelt beside Ranger, cradling his head in his hands. The shepherd's fur was matted with ash, his breathing shallow but steady. "You did it, boy," he whispered, voice breaking. "You saved her. You saved all of us." Ranger's eyes fluttered open just long enough to find Lily's face. His tail gave one faint wag before his head dropped back into her lap. Lily bent over him, sobbing into his soot-streaked fur round son. The fire sputtered and died. A last hiss of defiance before the storm itself arrived. At first, it was only a whisper, a shift in the air, the scent of wet earth cutting through the acrid smoke. Then, from the black clouds above, the first drop fell. It landed on Lily's hand, leaving a clean circle amid the soot. Another followed, then another. Within moments, the sky opened, rain pouring down in heavy, cleansing sheets, hissing on the ashes, running over Ranger's fur, streaking through Hope's gray skin like silver tears. Dr. Hayes tilted his head toward the heavens, eyes closed. The sound of rain swallowed everything else. The crackle of fire, the screams of panic, even the echoes of thunder. Lily pressed her forehead to Ranger's and whispered through her tears, "You're safe now. We all are." The camera of memory would hold that image forever. An old shepherd, a trembling elephant, and a little girl kneeling in the rain. A family forged not by blood, but by the fires they survived together. The rains had come, and with them, life. For the first time in years, the Mississippi Delta was alive again. The air shimmered not with heat, but with moisture. Green blades of grass pushed through the soil like whispers of hope. Wildflowers, dormant for so long, painted the banks in soft yellows and purples. The cracked earth that had once swallowed footprints now teemed with frogs, insects, and the slow hum of renewal. And in the middle of this reborn paradise stood Hope. He was no longer the frail calf they had found beneath the baobab's dying roots. He had grown into a magnificent young elephant, taller than Dr. Hayes, his skin smooth and full, his tusks small but proud. He splashed in the shallow pools with the exuberance of youth, flinging arcs of water into the air, trumpeting joyfully. Each sound echoed like a hymn of gratitude to the land that had finally remembered how to live. On the bank, Ranger watched. His fur had lost some of its luster, streaked now with silver and scars. His gait was slower, his breath heavier. Yet when his eyes followed Hope, his strange, gentle companion, there was something unbreakable in them. Pride, recognition, a quiet peace. Lily knelt beside him, her camera forgotten in her lap. "He's bigger every day," she said softly. Ranger's ear twitched at the sound of her voice. Dr. Hayes approached from behind, his expression unreadable. "He's maturing faster than I expected," he said. "He's beginning to answer the calls of wild herds again. His instincts are waking up." Lily looked up at him. "You mean he wants to leave?" The scientist sighed, eyes shifting toward the horizon, where distant elephants roamed like moving shadows. "Not yet, but soon. And the council's made its decision. They want to relocate him to the conservation sanctuary up north. They say it's for his safety." Lily's eyes widened. "They can't take him. Not now. Not after everything." Her father's voice cracked slightly. "I know, Lily, but we don't have the authority to stop it. They think we've interfered too much already, that we've broken natural order." She turned toward the water again, where Hope was nudging Ranger playfully with his trunk. The old shepherd gave a half-hearted bark and wagged his tail, enduring the affection like a tired but patient father. "Maybe," she whispered, "we didn't break it. Maybe we fixed something." That evening, the camp sat bathed in the orange glow of sunset. The air was thick with the hum of cicadas and the scent of wet earth. Dr. Hayes sat by the tent, scribbling into his worn field journal. His pen hesitated more than it moved. Words like separation, adaptation, and ethics blurred into one another, meaningless against the ache in his chest. Across the clearing, Lily sat beside Ranger, her knees drawn to her chest. The shepherd lay pressed against her legs, eyes half closed, tail flicking lazily against the grass. "You found him water," she murmured, her voice trembling. "When there wasn't any left. You saved him. When nobody else could." She looked toward the horizon where Hope wandered among the reeds. "Maybe now, he has to find his herd." Ranger's ear flicked again, as if in quiet agreement. Dr. Hayes looked up from his journal, watching them. The child, the dog, and the elephant that had rewritten the story of nature itself. His heart swelled and broke at once. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "Every species adapts, but I never thought I'd see one adapt to love." Night fell quietly over the delta. The moon hung low, reflected perfectly in the still water. Fireflies drifted like fallen stars. Somewhere in the distance, the deep rumble of elephants rolled across the plains, a language older than words, summoning one of their own. Hope lifted his head. His ears flared slightly, his trunk rising to taste the air. The sound stirred something inside him, an ancient pull, instinct whispering across the miles. He shifted uneasily, glancing toward the trees. Ranger stirred from his place by the campfire. His gaze followed Hope, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. The air between them was heavy with understanding. Hope stepped closer, lowering his massive head until his trunk brushed along the shepherd's back. A soft, deliberate caress. His breath stirred the old dog's fur. It was the same gesture he'd used as a calf, trembling beneath a dying tree, when the world had been cruel and empty. Now, it was goodbye. Ranger leaned into the touch, pressing his head against Hope's leg, his muzzle resting against the warm gray skin. He exhaled a slow, tired sigh, not of pain, but peace. From the shadows, Lily watched, her small frame trembling with quiet sobs. Dr. Hayes stood beside her, his camera in hand but unmoving. The lens caught the faint shimmer of moonlight over fur and skin, but he couldn't bring himself to record it. Some moments, he knew, were too sacred for science. Lily pressed her face into her father's side. "He's leaving, isn't he?" Hayes nodded silently. "He has to. It's who he is." "But what about Ranger?" He swallowed hard, unable to answer. The truth was written in the shepherd's weary body, in the way his eyes lingered on Hope, as though memorizing him. One last imprint before the instinct of the wild reclaimed what love had borrowed. Hope trumpeted softly, a low, mournful note that carried across the water like a farewell prayer. Ranger lifted his head and barked once, strong, clear, defiant, and for a heartbeat, the sound seemed to echo in perfect harmony with Hope's trumpet. Two voices that should never have met, united in the same rhythm of goodbye. Dr. Hayes lowered the camera at last. His voice was rough when he spoke. "Some stories aren't meant to be captured," he said quietly. "They're meant to be remembered." The wind stirred, carrying the scent of rain and grass through the camp. Lily looked up through tears, the stars reflected in her eyes. "Do you think he knows?" Her father smiled faintly. "He knows everything that matters." In the distance, Hope began to walk, slow, hesitant steps toward the dark silhouette of the herd beyond the reeds. But every few strides, he stopped and looked back. Ranger watched until the figure disappeared into moonlit fog. Then, with a soft groan, the old dog lay down, resting his head on his paws. Lily knelt beside him, her fingers buried in his fur. "You did good, Ranger," she whispered. "You always do." The night answered with silence, deep, serene, endless. And beneath the quiet Mississippi sky, love and instinct finally found balance. The baobab tree had grown green again. A year had passed since the night Hope walked into the mist, following the call of his herd. The drought had long broken. The Mississippi Delta now shimmered with life. Wildflowers blanketed the lowlands, dragonflies darted above the pools, and the air carried that sweet, damp scent of rebirth that comes only after long suffering. Beneath that same ancient tree, the one that had once sheltered a dying elephant calf and a grieving dog, lay Ranger. He was old now. His once proud frame had shrunk with time. His fur faded to a soft gray. His eyes still held warmth, but they were clouded with age. He no longer ran. He simply listened, to the river, to the wind, to the memory of the land. Each sound was a familiar friend. Lily visited every season with her father. She was taller now, her voice deeper, her laughter softer. Still, whenever she reached the baobab, she became that same little girl again, the one who had once found love between a shepherd and a lost elephant. On this morning, the air was thick with mist and the hush before dawn. Dr. Hayes adjusted the straps on his pack, while Lily crouched beside Ranger, brushing the dust from his collar. "You still remember, don't you, boy?" she whispered. "Every sound, every face you never forget." Ranger's tail thumped faintly against the ground, slow, deliberate. His breathing was shallow, his muzzle resting in her palm. He blinked once as if to say, "I'm still here." Dr. Hayes knelt beside them, his voice low. "He's holding on for you, Lily. Maybe for one more sunrise." Lily smiled weakly. "Then we'll give him the most beautiful one." They sat together in silence, the world still wrapped in shadow. Then, faintly at first, the ground trembled. A soft vibration, like thunder buried deep beneath the earth. Ranger's ears twitched. His nose lifted. His cloudy eyes turned toward the horizon. Lily frowned. "Dad, do you hear that?" Dr. Hayes stood, scanning the mist. The sound came again, deep, rhythmic, ancient, a low rumble that carried through the trees. "Elephants," he whispered. Lily's heart stopped. No, it can't be, but it was. Through the gray dawn light, dark shapes began to emerge. First one, then several more. Their footsteps shook the soft earth as they approached the tree line. The mist parted like a curtain, and there he was. Hope. No longer the calf they had rescued. No longer the trembling creature under the baobab's shade. He had become a full-grown bull, tall and strong, his tusks gleaming ivory white against the morning light. Scars from his youth still traced faint lines across his skin, like echoes of the journey that had made him. Behind him moved a herd, calm, reverent, as if guided by something sacred. Hope stopped a few paces from the baobab, ears wide, silent. Then came a deep rumble, low and rolling, trembling through the ground, the roots and the hearts around him. Ranger stirred. His frail body shook, his cloudy eyes lifted, and for a brief, shining moment, they cleared. His tail wagged. Lily's tears broke free. "He knows him," she whispered. Hope stepped closer, slow and careful, lowering himself until his head met the old dog's. His trunk trembled as it brushed Ranger's muzzle. The same gesture from years ago, when the elephant had been small and dying beneath this very tree. Now it spoke of gratitude and love that defied nature. Ranger sighed softly, his nose twitching against Hope's skin. The elephant rumbled, a sound like distant thunder. The herd fell silent. Lily knelt, clutching Ranger. "You waited for him," she whispered. That night, rain fell, gentle and endless. Lily and her father stayed beside Ranger beneath the baobab, while the herd lingered nearby. Hope stood closest, his trunk resting on Ranger's back. The dog's breath slowed. Lily cradled him, rain and tears mingling. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're home." Dr. Hayes laid a hand on Ranger's paw. "He protected the world's gentlest giant," he said, voice trembling. "Love isn't instinct. It's a choice." Ranger's chest rose once more, then stilled. Hope lifted his trunk and released a long, mournful trumpet that echoed across the delta. The herd answered with low rumbles, honoring a passing soul. By morning the air was clean. They buried Ranger beneath the baobab, where the grass was soft and water close. Hope stayed until the sun climbed high, then placed a green branch over the mound, a symbol of life. Years later, a camera flickered in a classroom. A woman stood before the children. Lily Hayes, her hair silver, her eyes kind. On the screen played the old footage. A girl, a shepherd, and a baby elephant walking through dust, toward hope. "This," she said softly, "is where I learned what love means. It doesn't follow rules. It just finds a way." Back in the Delta, Ranger's collar hung from the baobab. Beneath it, Hope's newborn calf splashed in rainwater, bright-eyed, playful, echoing the past. The circle was complete. In the end, stories like Ranger's remind us that love doesn't need words. It only needs presence. A loyal heart, a soft glance, a quiet moment shared between two souls who trust each other completely. German shepherds have always carried that kind of love. Steady, selfless, and brave. The kind that stands guard even when the world grows dark. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt they understood you, even when no one else did, then you already know what this story means. It's a reminder to slow down, to listen, and to love them back with the same devotion they give so freely. And if you ever want to learn ways to deepen that bond, to understand your dog's heart a little better, there's a wonderful resource I've come across that you might enjoy exploring. It's not a sales pitch, just something that touched me, and might touch you too. Because in the end, what we share with our dogs isn't ownership, it's family, and love like that, it's worth protecting.